You have to train your clients the way they need to be trained, not the way you train. Most personal trainers are broke because they don't do it full time. They do personal training on the side at 4 gyms. They sell supplements.
Hey, I got you guys protein shake.
Awesome, I love protein.
They have their own clothing line. They're working on a shoe line. They're working as a valet at the Ritz. They have 7 jobs. Hormozi said it best. You have to go all in on one thing, 2 things max. How are you ever going to be an expert in your industry if you're in 8 industries? You know, if you're really going to do something, commit to it. Without the commitment, why would you expect anything other than mediocre results?
There's a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to the show. Did you have an oh shit moment? Like, there's no going back. Like when you put in that PO with that first gym, what was that like? With your first unit, what was that like?
Yeah, not really. I wouldn't say that was my oh shit moment, simply because like I already had like clientele in Naples, Florida for training that I knew those people were going to go with me anywhere, right? Like I had gotten those clients from my marketing. It wasn't like the gym that I was working at got me those clients and those were the gym's clients. Those were my personal brand's clients, right? At the time, Bodies by Carlos, right? Those were clients that I procured, right? That have been with me for years. So I wasn't too worried about that. But yeah, I mean, it's like anything. I mean, you know, when you dish out, you know, some money, the other thing about this business model is that it's pretty lean, right? Like you don't have to go start a, you know, $300,000 build out on a gym, right? So like I dished out 20 grand. And although that was the biggest investment I had ever done, you know, at that time, you know, I don't really feel like I was like, oh shit, like I didn't go to Chase and ask for a $200,000 loan to start a business, right? And so I don't really think that was the oh shit moment. What I did have an oh shit moment was like after our first 12 months in business, you know, we tripled our revenue. Like I did 3x what I did at the gym, right? And I obviously didn't have to pay the gym a percentage of my sales anymore. So it was really, really 3x, probably a little bit more than 3x without the gym's commission. So I was like, oh shit, this really works, you know? So that was more so the oh shit moment, right? I think the cool thing too, right, for entrepreneurs listening out there, like when you have an idea for a business, you kind of envision it in your mind, right, of how it's going to work out, who your ideal customer is going to be, how they're going to enjoy the service, you know, if they're going to have any feedback for you. But one cool thing that happened for us is because our price is per home, not per person, we got a lot of couples that were coming out, right? And so this became like such a productive and unique, you know, part of their day, right, in their marriages and in their relationships, right, like a very positive part. And so they would always tell us like how much they love the service, and you see like they're flirting during the sessions and like pushing each other, and like all of a sudden, like, you know, not to say like we're marriage counselors, but like their marriage is getting better because of this service. And I thought that was a really cool thing. And like, I mean, my wedding, you know, we wanted to have like 50 people. We ended up having 200 people at our wedding. So like all of our clients wanted to go. And they were all like, yeah, when's your wedding? Oh, that's cool. Where is it? Oh, I don't think we're doing anything that weekend. And it's like, they basically invited themselves. And so, but that's really what you talk about, like when you build a business, right? Whether it's local, whether you're going, you know, international, global, like you got to build a community, right? No matter how small or how big, right? And sometimes you have to do it in steps, right? So my advice for any entrepreneur out there that's listening to this is you got to build that community, right? And so one thing that we've been able to do very successfully with VersaGym is build those communities locally. And those customers have been with us for, you know, we have people that have been with us since we started, you know, in 2020, right? And consistently paying that $1,000 plus per month since 2020, right?
Damn.
Where like that marketing and, you know, having to drive memberships at a gym, like that's not, we don't think about that, right? Like it really frees us up to like think about, okay, how to really move the needle in our businesses.
Yeah, we were talking about that a little off show. Your acquisition model is different, like we're saying, than the traditional box gym, the traditional CrossFit gym, that type of thing. Right. Explain the difference between VersaGym marketing to get that $1,000 a ticket a month for personal training is great. Like that's awesome. I don't really hear that. What does the client acquisition side of that look like?
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you have a person or a household that, you know, is paying you anywhere between $12,000 to $6,000 and up, you know, per year to train with you, right? Like, I always refer back to that Lamborghini statement, that they came out with saying like, our ideal customer is not sitting around watching TV, so we don't do commercials. But it's the same thing with us. We've tried the Facebook marketing, Instagram ads, and although we've had some success with them in terms of booking free trials, and that's kind of how we do it. It's like, hey, book us for free. We'll come to your house, give you an hour session. If you don't like it, no commitment, right? And that's been excellent for us. But in terms of the digital marketing, it's been really hit or miss, and never really, hey, we booked somebody up or booked, 3 or 4 time slots up for one of our franchises through digital marketing. But one is the word of mouth, right? Like, a neighbor telling another neighbor, or even a neighbor just getting results with us. They go out to throw out the trash, and the other neighbor's like, whoa, like you look great. Like obviously that trainer is really helping you. Let me hire them. Let me call them, right? So that's one side of the business. 2, driving the VersaGyms around, right? Like it's a mobile billboard, right? Like I always tell this story, and I probably sound like a broken tape recorder to anyone who's probably like listened to this, that's seen any of my content before. But for me, like 2 years ago, one of the only neighborhoods in Naples that hadn't hired me was in Pine Ridge Estates, right? And I used to live across the street from Pine Ridge Estates in Naples Park. And so I'm like, I can't believe no one's ever called me from there, right? And so I'm like telling my wife this, I'm like, somehow over the next 3 months, I'm going to get a client there. Well, across the street from Pine Ridge, right on 41, there's like a dermatologist office. I had a dermatologist appointment, and I parked my trailer and my truck like right like next to like a Starbucks, right next to the office. Anyway, long story short, somebody that lived in Pine Ridge Estates, right, was pulling into the Starbucks in their Rolls Royce, and they saw the VersaGym, call me, and they're like, hey, are you a personal trainer that comes to people's homes? I was like, yeah, that's exactly what we do. Okay, I want to book a free trial. At the time, like just in the craziness of my day, like I took his address down, I put him in our system, and I didn't even look at the address. Well, like a week later, when I went to the appointment, as I'm getting closer to the house, I'm like, this is in Pine Ridge Estates, and so like manifesting and just like driving that, VersaGym around is something that we preach to our operators, to our trainers, managers, and franchisees. Is like, you got to drive that thing around.
That's so funny that you say that, because I am going to get a new car this year, and the first thing I said is I just want to wrap that thing with Grit Media all over it. Perfect. And just drive that thing around everywhere I go. Exactly. I think that it's funny because we talk about this with a lot of different people consistently, no matter what the business was, service industry wise. The number one way to grow is through word of mouth. Yep. Because if you deliver an awesome service, most of the time people just conversating about what their experience was usually leads to your next client. But it's that snowball effect. The follow-up question I have for that is, why do you think most personal trainers are broke?
Yeah, I think, statistically speaking, if you look at personal trainers in America, only 1% of personal trainers actually do it full time. Okay. So you have to look at it that way, right? So if you just look up statistics through the IRS, yeah, like the average personal trainer makes like 20 grand or something like that. It is a year or something like that. But it's a side hustle for them. It's someone who lifts weights, who is in shape, and then uses that as like, okay, I'm going to, essentially sell my look to, other people. Like, hey, if I could do it for myself, I can do it for you. Mm-hmm. But that couldn't be any further from the truth. Like I always tell my trainers, like, hey, you have to train your clients the way they need to be trained, not the way you train. Right. And that's where most personal trainers make a mistake. But yeah, that's the thing, right? Like most personal trainers are broke because they, one, don't do it full time, right? So you go talk to any trainer in town, they're, working at the Orange Theory. They do personal training on the side at 4 gyms. They sell supplements, right? They have their own clothing line. They're working on a shoe line. They're, working as a valet at the Ritz. They have 7 jobs, right? So it's like, Hormozi said it best. Like it's, you have to go all in on one thing, 2 things max, right? It's like, how are you ever going to be an expert in your industry if you're in 8 industries, So that's my best piece of advice to personal trainers out there is like, if you're really going to do something, commit to it, right? And without the commitment, why would you expect anything other than mediocre results?
And you went ahead, you did something interesting that we talked about off show as well. You invested into your personal brand. Mm-hmm. What do you think is a good personal brand strategy for personal trainers?
Yeah, I think nowadays, like the landscape of personal branding is a lot different than it used to be. Right. So I think like, just getting out there, delivering value in your content, right? But actual value, not, hey, this is how you do a bicep curl and sign up for my 12-week challenge, right? But actual value. And I think that changes throughout the years. And I think you're seeing that now where you really have to pay more attention to like the algorithm. You have to pay a lot more attention to like even what other personal trainers are doing, right? To kind of stay consistent with how people are providing value on those platforms. Like when I was building my personal brand, it was completely different. It was, you post a shirtless picture, you post 3 tips in the caption, and that was good enough. Now that'll get you 5 likes if you're lucky, right? So those things change, but ultimately, like with everything, like with, hey, going all in on your personal training business, if you're trying to build a personal brand, go all in on it and like don't expect results for the first couple years. And if you get the results, great, but you have to have that mindset of, and that's nothing to say you can't strategize how to get better every week with your strategy. But like so many people nowadays, like, oh, I worked on my personal brand for 30 days, didn't get shit. Whatever, not going to do it anymore. You have to just put in the time and the effort, and through that failure, you just get better every time. So
I think it could be harder for personal trainers to like build that business and brand when you're working at like a gym like Orange Theory or an LA Fitness. We talked about it again a little bit before. Can you explain the benefits to any personal trainers out there listening? Like, why should they come to VersaGym? How can they expand their clientele, their portfolio by coming to you guys as opposed to working at an LA Fitness?
Yeah, I think, nothing, wrong with those business models per se. But I think they're all very similar and they're very alike. And I think everyone needs to start somewhere, so I'm not opposed to someone like working at a big box gym to kind of get their feet wet and have a lot of volume in their training, career, right? Because those gyms, what they do have is a lot of volume. So even if you get a lot of free trials, even if the people can't afford high ticket personal training, you're at least getting that repetition, right? That high volume in those free trials to get better at your closing pitch, right? So, there's levels to everything. But just to go off of what you're saying in terms of VersaGym is like, this is a business model that was created by a personal trainer who's now a franchisor, right? So like everything that we do is geared to helping personal trainers either start their own business or start as a trainer or a manager for us, and then, gradually transition into owning their own business. So like one of the career paths that we have is like a manager with us can start with us at, let's say, our Palm Beach Gardens location, right? And then we'll work on a path for them and we'll do strategic goal setting for them for their career of, hey, now if you want, you can partner with this owner in Palm Beach Gardens, open up another location together, right? But first you have to start at this location, right? Like you're not putting any equity, any money down, anything like that. You're working your tail off, making sure that this location is successful, thus proving to this franchise owner that one, you can be trusted, that two, you can deliver results. So now they'll put more money back into you and open another location with you. Or that owner might want to open 2 or 3 other locations. Well, now that manager can become more of a district or regional manager, right? You see that a lot in franchise systems, right? So really for us, it's always making sure that and we do this across the board, not just with our trainers, anyone that helps us with marketing, my assistant, right? Like where do you want to be over the next 3 to 5 years? What are your goals and how can we help you get to where you want to be? Right. And I think that the best companies do that, is help people get to where they want to be, not just, hey, what can this employee do for me? But also, what can my company and me as a founder do for you in your career? So,
yeah, I think there's clearly so much more upside to doing it this way. So outside of like NASM, ACE, those type of things, those certifications, do you guys require any more like continuing education, further education just on a personal training side above and beyond like the NASM course or the ACE course?
No, we don't, man. We don't. We just ask that they stay active, and then they have to do their renewals when those come due. But for the most part, I mean, like I get calls from people all the time, trainers interested in the franchising and starting their own or just working with one of our locations, right? And they're like, yeah, I got 15 certifications. And then I'm like, well, when was the last time you helped anyone?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I haven't actually trained a client in 5 years, And it's one of those things like, well, you just like to study, bro.
Yep.
You just like to take tests, like, so it's one of those things like, again, I always go back and say this, like, give me a trainer who's hungry and who has the heart and the patience to help other people through health and fitness, and I can teach them the rest, but without that, you're never going to be successful in training. So, I mean, it's very easily to like look at the statistics of like, oh, personal trainers are broke and stuff like that. But it's like, because most of them don't take it serious. If you wake up every day with the mindset of like, from the time that I wake up to like the time I go to sleep, I'm going to work on this business, learn customer acquisition, marketing, put myself out there, ask my clients for referrals. Like that's one thing that most trainers don't do is like, I don't get enough referrals. When was the last time you asked for one? So.
Yeah.
It's funny, right? Because I think what you just hit on is why we love doing this show, because we have interviewed at this point 47 people for the podcast. And every time we're knocking on the door of what does it mean and what does it take to be truly successful in the game of business, in the game of life, in the game of health and fitness, whatever it is. And it all comes back to the same thing, a maniacal focus on I'm going to die or I'm going to win. And there's no difference between the two. I'm just going to keep going until I get there. When you look at your career, what was the moment where you were like, man, I'm getting kicked in the teeth right now and I feel like I might want to quit?
Yeah. Definitely after franchising. So after franchising, we quickly launched in Dallas. And then we were launching in Palm Beach pretty quickly. And then right after that, like as we were in the process of launching VersaGym in Palm Beach, we got like a lead through a Google ad to launch in Tennessee. And so like, here we are, I'm a 24-year-old kid. My business partner at the time, who's no longer with the company, but my business partner at the time is like 21, and like, we're like, dude, are we really doing this? Like it was a lead in Tennessee off of like a, $15 per day Google ad spend. And I'm like, literally like, no, this is crazy, dude. We're going international. Right. And so one, you get overly hopeful, right? And you get married to the idea of like, this is done. We're going to sell 1 or 2 franchises a month and we're golden. Like we're going to be all over the country, pretty soon here. And like, I fly out to Tennessee and like, I meet the guy and like, I'm in his living room and, we're pretty much like, deal's done. Like, we get wired, $50K to us and, we're moving, we order all his equipment. And, as the equipment's en route to his house, he like sends us like an attorney letter, like, oh, like I'm backing out of the deal. And I want all my money back.
Damn.
Yeah. And so obviously I immediately call my business partner and I'm like cursing him out, like, dude, like, cause in his attorney letter, he like said like, oh, like there was like a paperwork, like some piece of paper that like he signed, but we didn't sign. And so thus like the deal wasn't official or something like that. And so like we figured out that we did have the paperwork signed by both parties. We just hadn't sent it back to him. So anyway, it was a whole thing, bro. But it's basically 2 20-year-old kids that didn't know what the hell they were doing. That like
Feel that.
that like it bit us in the ass. And so, and then after that, like in 2023, like if you look at the statistics for like emerging brands in 2023, unless you're part of a bigger company, right? Like for example, like what's this company called? Self-Esteem Brands, right? So you have Anytime Fitness. Self-Esteem Brands owns like 3 other concepts, right? So like those brands, like any new concept that Self-Esteem Brands launch in 2023, obviously they feed off the resources from their bigger brands. So like those were like skyrocketing. But like any like emerging brand in any industry in 2023, I don't know if it was interest rates or necessarily what it was like very stagnant. And so like for us, very stagnant, you had Hurricane Ian down here. So all this stuff is going on, at like the end of 22, beginning of 2023. And then at the same time, I was negotiating a buyout to my business partner. So that was a time in business where I was like, dude, and we took on an investor, to help us with all this stuff. And so like, the investor expects a return on their investment. And so just transitioning from being a personal trainer with the personal brand and being a reality TV kid to like being now like a full-pledged like entrepreneur with investors, attorneys, and business partnerships, and franchisees. And like you could be having a bad day, but your franchisee in Dallas, Texas invested into your company to be successful, and you got to put on a smile and be like, dude, everything's going to be great, and help them. Right. But ultimately I always remember why I even started the company in the first place, which is to deliver the best service possible to, our customers. And then you would have those bad days, but then the next day you wake up and you're like, it's going to be okay. We're going to keep grinding this out. And then, you get a call from one of your franchisees, right? So I get a call from my Palm Beach Gardens guy, and he's like, dude, you're not going to believe this. He's like, there's a drug and rehab center here in Palm Beach Gardens. And they hired me to train the drug and rehab patients. And the drug and rehab patients technically get it for free, but the insurance company pays the center, and the center pays my franchisee.
Oh, wow.
Right. And so that's been a booming business in Palm Beach Gardens because they have Jupiter right there. And Jupiter is actually, we didn't even realize this when we launched there, that Jupiter is one of the drug and rehab center capital of the country. Yeah. It's like the most drug and rehab centers per like mile or whatever is in Jupiter. And so, you get those stories. And it's like, there's no way I could drive every day to Palm Beach Gardens and train these, patients in these rehab centers because I have a full schedule in Naples. But through franchising, we were able to replicate the business model in another city where we wouldn't be able to do that, if we didn't franchise, right? And because of that, those patients are getting training, right? And so that's why I do it, right? And so like, I think the most successful business owners, they just can get through a higher level of stress. And it's like, as you get through those higher levels, those levels of stress just become normal, where like most people will crumble under that stress, right? Like that's just like your new norm. And then there's like the next level and like the next level after that. And it's like, that's just a new normal for us, right?
It's funny because I was having a conversation with my primary care physician today. And one of the questions she asked me, she's like, what does your stress look like?
Yeah.
And I'm like, never been higher. And she's like, well, what does your stress management look like? And I'm like, it's actually never been better, because I think there's this idea, and we were talking about this yesterday, from a male perspective, just speaking from obviously, a male perspective, life is never realistically easy. And I think that we live in this world where like there's this misnomer of like work until, push hard and then.
Right.
And there's always this like, and then, or until I do this, or whatever the situation is, it'll get easier when. Right. And I keep coming back to this idea of like, I don't think that's actually the way the world works. I think if you want to do anything spectacular, and even if you don't, the world is still going to kick your ass every single day. I think you have to have a strong enough reason why you show up. And coming back to what you just said, it's that why behind it. I'm curious, how do you manage stress on the day-to-day? Do you have something like we fall back on our faith, our workouts, each other, our families? What's your go-to to level with your stress?
Yeah, for me personally is my family and my wife. Like I have an 11-month-old son, just turned 11 months yesterday. And so he's awesome. So like, I'm a pretty, self-disciplined, motivated guy, but like go have a kid, and then like all of a sudden it's like to the next level.
You got no choice.
Right? Yeah, you have no choice. And my wife, man, my wife's an amazing partner. My wife left the dental industry. She had been in the dental industry for like almost 10 years and joined VersaGym, right? And then now she's a stay-at-home mom and just helps with like some administrative stuff here and there. But that's like, my team, my support, and for me, I know that, again, the perspective, right? Like I know that why I do things, right, is very important to me. And like knowing that those customers are getting, and those clients and those rehab patients are getting that level of service that they wouldn't if we hadn't launched the business. But also I think perspective of like, it could always be worse. And it's like, okay, so, you might have some investors that you owe money to, right? And you're making your monthly payments or whatever. But like, it's so easy to think like I'm the only one dealing with these issues, and then just go read a book. And so if there's anything that I did in 2023, 2024 that helped me get through all of that, was read books. And I always take it back to like this book that I read by the guys who did Anytime Fitness, the first thing that I realized was these guys franchised like Anytime Fitness when they were like 37. I was like, dude, I'm 27, right? I was like,
Yep.
I'm like ahead
Out
of
of the
them.
curve.
You know what I mean? You know,
Yep.
and not to necessarily, you know, compare, right? But just, it's good to know, like, in terms of franchising, like, I got 10 years on these guys, right? 2, these guys bought out, like, I was struggling with a business, you know, buyout for my partner, right? Like, I was buying my partner out, and these guys, and I was dealing with like very little sums of money compared to these guys, right? These guys bought out their third partner. It was 3 partners that started Anytime Fitness. They bought out their third partner, and they had to take out this massive loan, right? And at the time, they were getting like $600,000 or $700,000 a month in royalties. They had about 1,000 locations when they did this, but the loan that they took out, they were paying about 300 grand a month in interest alone, not just principal, right? Well, I'm like, dude, I'm not dealing with anything close to this. You know what I mean? And but it's cool to put in perspective, right? Same thing. I read Shoe Dog from the guy who did Nike.
Great
and it's
book.
like amazing book. Like I will for sure read that again.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I like was reading it and listening to the audiobook at the same time, and I was like, I'll for sure read that again. Like the things that guy had to go through, like to get Nike to where it is. So like, suffering is part of the process. And it makes you who you're supposed to be to get your company where it needs to be, right? And like trying to avoid that is like the most like certain way to fail.
You mentioned your wife quit her career to join VersaGym.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on mixing family and work? Because we get all the time like you guys started a business with your friends, like good luck kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to hear what your take is on that.
Yeah, I think it just depends on the situation. You know, like for me, I never wanted my wife to, you know, at the time she was my fiance, and I didn't want her to leave her job, right? Because I egged her on or I convinced her. Like I wanted to be something that, you know, came from her end, right? So I never pushed her. But I was just letting her know, like, just letting you know, at your job, you're not being appreciated right now. Right. And so like she was starting not to like her job and starting to come home like, you know, sad after her work days. And just like, you know, there was a little bit of like, you know, workplace drama going on where she worked at. And I was like looking at her pay stubs. I'm like, you know, you don't have to deal with this, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, luckily,
that's a flex, dog. That's a flex.
You know, luckily we were in a position where it's like, one, I mean, you could just quit.
Yeah.
Like, luckily we're in a position where, you know, we were doing like, I think at the time, like 15,000 a month in training sales.
Hell yeah.
You know, this is like our first year in business. And so I'm like, you could quit, you know? I wanted her to know that like, she wasn't like necessarily like had to stay there. But then too, like she's a very, loving person and she cares about people a lot. And I'm like, oh, dude, she would make a great trainer, right? And like I had like a couple girls that had been working out with me at Anytime Fitness before I started the company that, you know, I didn't have time for anymore because I'm with the trailer business, right? And I had set up at the time in our garage at our house. I had set up in Naples Park. I had set up a gym, right? And like I trained there myself. I had one-off clients that would come to the garage to work out. We have been training in there during COVID. Before the first VersaGym trailer arrived. And so she was like, yeah, do you think I could train some clients? And she had already done her certification. And I was like, yeah, I got 2 people for you. And so like these girls started coming, started seeing results. And my wife fell in love with it. And so she eventually quit her job. And she actually tried one more job. She tried interior designing because she said in high school she always wanted to do that. And I was like, well, what better time to do it than now? Right. And so she gave that a shot, didn't like it, and then just came back to VersaGym and started training. So it was cool.
What do you think is the makeup of a good partner?
Yeah. I think, you know, partnerships are supposed to elevate, you know, I think the two, how do I want to describe this? Think like both sides, right, have to equal a larger sum than individually, right? And that's how I look at a partnership. It's like it's 2 people with different characteristics, different traits, different skills that can come together, and you know the sum, you know, the whole is bigger than the individuals, right? So that's the way that I look at it. And it's one of those things, like, it has to work, like everybody has to pull their weight, right? And so, like, for me, my wife, like, she keeps me organized, she keeps me fed, she keeps my baby safe. Like, my baby's like super advanced, like he's doing stuff like that 11 months old, like, people that are, kids that are 14 months, babies that are 14 months old are doing. So it's great, man. I mean, it works for us. I think for everyone, it's different, but it works for us. And I know a lot of high level entrepreneurs and CEOs that they work better that way. And I know that I do. So it's good that I have that.
You said interior design, and it made me think, did you like design the trailers yourself? Like, pick the equipment, what's going to go in there? Like, what was that like? Because I'm trying to picture if I could take a whole gym and minimize it into one trailer, like what equipment am I taking that's going to be enough equipment in there that can tailor it to anybody? It's like, what did that look like for you trying to design this thing?
Yeah. So, we were talking a little bit off show about this. So I had called this company that was making these trailers for the military. So they already had like a product, right? And then in terms of like the equipment that went inside it, they already had like the basic structure. But in terms of like how many dumbbells, kettlebells, bars went in there, that's something that I picked. Yeah. Depending on the space that we had inside the trailers. But yeah, the manufacturers, they basically made it all for us. And then we just added other things, that like different things to do abs and like resistance bands and like things that we knew were light, but convenient and could help people get a really good workout. That's the way that we tried to do that. But we're actually in the process of making our very own gym in a Sprinter van. And that's something that I've been working on for around a year and a half. And it's a proprietary model. We're patent pending on it. And so basically it's think of the biggest Sprinter van you've ever seen on the road, except it's a gym. And it has like LED lights. It's got, speakers, subwoofers, mirrors inside, a cable system. So we're super excited about that. It's a patent pending. I do have already manufacturers here in Florida that'll make it for me. So we're just kind of getting the go ahead from attorneys to be able to make the first prototype. And we hope that here in 2025, we'll have that first prototype. And then we have meetings with investors as well to kind of help us roll it out. Because like the thought process is, okay, we're going to keep this just for our franchisees. So like this is another incentive. Why would people buy a VersaGym franchise? Well, not only are you going to get marketing help, proven, a proven business model, support from a franchise team. Not only do you get to use the VersaGym brand, right, our intellectual property, our trademark, but apart from all that, you also get this proprietary mobile gym that you can't buy anywhere else,
Dude,
right?
Sick.
So that's something that we're working on. But the other way that we could go about it is, if the franchising doesn't take off the way we wanted to, franchising is a very competitive industry, then we could just sell it to trainers. We could just sell it to people, as well.
Because it's a proprietary product.
Exactly.
Very cool.
So that's the next step for VersaGym is creating that product. A lot of man hours have gone into that, but we're super proud of it. And we're still refining it a little bit before we send it out to the manufacturer to get the prototype made. But we're super happy with it.
Do you run into issues with like weight, like when you're building this out, like how much weight you could put on the Sprinter van?
Yeah. So, I mean, I try to make them as heavy duty as possible. Yeah. One, so you don't run into that problem, but two, so also that you can ensure that it lasts as long as possible. So like we're doing like a dually Sprinter with dually wheels in the back. And obviously like the most heavy duty, transmission and everything that the Ford will make and the Mercedes will make. So
do you do anything with like pop-ups, like group training? Like, are you bringing it to like a corporation? You can bring a group class out there. So I know you mentioned like you're doing couples, they come to your house. Are you guys going down any like a pop-up gym in like a parking lot at the beach or like at a corporation or a business or anything like that? Yeah.
So 90% of the business, what we've seen has worked the best is residential, going to people's homes, doing the couples, the families, or, just get sometimes one person that comes out. About 10% of the business is corporations. So drug and rehab centers, like we said, and then our guy in Dallas does a tech company. You know, I've done like a dermatologist down here as well.
Yeah.
So after the workday, I'll go over there like at 6 o'clock and train the staff. So that's something that we've done as well. So corporations, like the B2B component is definitely there, not just the B2C with this business model. So we're happy to continue to grow in that aspect. And then one thing that we started in 2024 was the assisted stretch therapy. So we've been doing stretch therapy, where like now my guy in Dallas, like instead of having to buy another truck and another VersaGym trailer to scale his business, what he can do is he can hire a stretch therapist. He already has all the clients that pay for the high-end personal training business. And then what we'll do is we'll offer all those clients a free trial of the assisted stretch therapy. And then all you have to do for that is, you know, hire a stretch therapist, right? Make sure they're trained up, have their paperwork signed, buy them a massage table, buy them a massage gun, and then you just send them. You put them in our scheduling software, and then you just send them to all these people's homes, and you already have all the clientele there. So now we have people that are paying us, you know, $1,500 a month for training, and then they're paying us $500 a month for stretching, or some people will even buy packages of the stretching. So they'll buy like $2,000 worth of stretching, you know, so kind of increasing that value for the customers. And then another thing we've seen too is like we'll get customers that like we were actively pursuing to sign up for training that just we haven't been able to budge to get them to budge to buy training, but now they'll buy stretch therapy because it's one of those things like who doesn't like someone with a massage table to show up at their house,
For real.
you know,
For real.
show up, you know, a trailer and you got to come out and work out, right? Like that's not for everyone, right?
Yep.
But the stretch therapy has been a nice little add-on, so it helps us scale each location without like, you know, much investment.
Dude, this would the stretch therapy like at a Ragnar race or like an ultra marathon or something like that would absolutely crush.
Yeah.
Like we just ran one, and if you told me I could pay you a certain amount of money and somebody would come just stretch my legs, I would any dollar in the world.
Yeah, that's a great idea actually. Yeah.
The partnering with like race companies for that specifically would be huge. I'm curious, going back to the personal development side, you mentioned reading, and it's so funny, like that is like the core foundation of like what has gotten me through the hardest points. Cause again, it's like context is the best medicine for entrepreneurship. Just like it's been worse elsewhere. What is the most impactful books you've ever read?
Yeah, the most impactful books, Love Work by Chuck Runyon, who is the guy who started Anytime Fitness. Shoe Dog, obviously by Phil Knight, another amazing one. The Obstacle is the Way is a huge one. Yeah, those three books definitely helped me the most in 2024. I mean, going into 2024, like we had sold franchises in 23, and in 2024 we didn't sell any franchises. But what we did is we positioned our company in 2024 for success for like the next 5 to 10 years. You know, like we were able to do so much back end work and really refine like, okay, who are we looking for that fits our brand in terms of franchisees? And okay, who do we have in the company right now? And like, quite honestly, who just needs to go? You know, who needs to go? And like, you know, it has to be, you know, one of those things like when I think of VersaGym 3 years from now, when we have this humongous headquarters and you got to go into the office to work every day, I'm not a trainer anymore, right? I've either sold my location or I have a full-time manager running my Naples location, and I just have to go in and just be the CEO every day. Like, who am I going to like light up every day when I see them in the morning and I can joke around with them? And going back to what you're saying about doing business with friends, I think that's one of the best things you can do as long as you guys are able to keep it business professional as well. Right. And so what I mean by that is like knowing that you guys are friends, but like if you have to call each other out on your bullshit, you can do that. And that's a super important thing. And where we were at as a company, we could not do that. You know, like there was people in our company that just were not, you know, upholding the standards that I wanted in our company. And it was going to hurt our franchisees. It was going to help. It was going to hurt us long term as we grew as a company. So I was like, yeah, we have to make a turn, make a change now, you know, before we continue to grow the business. And ultimately too, I think when you're around negative energy, you know, you just like your productivity, your creativeness just goes down the drain. And for me, as soon as I was able to get away from all that, it was just like all of a sudden, like I moved faster in 3 months creating that sprinter gym, you know, than I had in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, like that.
Yep.
Right. And so I think that's something that's really big. You know, your environment, who you hang around with, who you surround yourself with. So
I'd be interested to get your take. We're obviously entrepreneurs building in Naples. What do you think is the unique competitive advantage to building a company in Naples? And then what do you think some of the competitive disadvantages of building in Naples are?
yeah, I mean, in terms of the pros of building a company in Naples is like, obviously you have very affluent people here, right? And so like if you're a service-based business like we are, right, you can test your model in this area and probably get profitable very quickly if you're providing a good service. Right, which the problem is most people don't provide a good service.
Fair enough.
Right? Even just people that'll try to market me, right? To try to say, hey, I want to work with you, I want to do this for you, do that for you. It's okay. And it takes 2 weeks to get a deliverable. It's like, if it takes 2 weeks to get a deliverable, you know what I mean?
Probably
Like,
not the guy for you.
probably not the type of person I want to work with.
Yeah.
Right? And then those are the same people, like you ghost them and they're like, oh, like this person, like they're not about it. Like they're not, it's like, no, dude, I just pump out more content in one day than you do in a month, So I think that's something that's important for me. And ultimately, I think I've changed my perspective on like who I do business with. Like it has to be someone that I can click with, because if not, I just don't think it'll work. But yeah, the pros is obviously you can test it out in Naples and see, how successful you can be with it. And then the disadvantages is, if you're a tech company, probably not the best place to start is in Naples, right? Because like you have other tech hubs around the United States, right? You have like Austin, Texas now is booming, right, for the tech. Silicon Valley, obviously, always. Miami, obviously, you have a tech scene there. So like to start a tech startup in Naples, like I think all that stuff matters a lot less now because you have social media.
I agree.
And you have things that can connect you. But like, are you going to go out to like a kava bar in Naples and like meet like a tech, angel investor? Probably not. Right. In Miami, yeah, you could. Right. Right. In Austin, Texas, obviously, yeah, you probably could. So I think it has its pros and its cons. But I think learning how to work around that, learning how to work around those things is the biggest thing that entrepreneurs need to do, is learn, through those failures and just learn and keep growing, man.
One of the questions that we ask everybody is, what does grit, the name of the podcast is Piece of Grit. What does grit specifically mean to you?
When I think of grit, like the first thing that pops into my mind is like just like plowing through adversity. Just like life's gonna bring adversity in everything that you do, right? And so like for me, I want to be the best entrepreneur, business owner, mentor, husband, son, father that I can be, right? And it comes with its ups and its downs. But you're going to be faced with adversity, and the way you respond to that adversity is going to shape your life, right? And so like what we do today, right? You're going to be thinking about that next year. It's like, oh man, if I would have done this last January, like I'd be in a different situation. I think people don't really think about the consequences of each little decision that they make on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I think if more people thought about those things, so that's something like I've trained my mind to do. It's like, hey, if I don't like record a podcast, like I'm not going to have marketing material. Right. And if I don't have marketing material, I'm not going to, grow my brand. And if I can't grow my brand, I'm definitely not going to sell franchise. Right. Or if I do get an interested candidate who's looking at my franchise and I haven't posted in 3 months, well, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do business with them, because the reality is they could go look at the next brand. And if the next brand's been posting twice a day, kind of just gives off a vibe of this company's active, right? This company might be able to provide more value to me as a franchisee and as a business owner than this other brand, right? So just, I think thinking more so of the consequences that your actions have, like if you don't do certain things. I don't know. That's a game that I like to play with myself and in my mind. So
I think we have 24 hours, and what people don't realize, because everybody's like the I'll do it tomorrow person, by doing that, like James Clear talks about it, it's like your habits create your reality.
Yep.
And all we have is 24 hours, like a 24-hour shot at the day to prove to ourselves who we are. So if you say, I'll do it tomorrow, you are therefore creating the habit that you are the do it tomorrow person. and you'll just compound on that day after day after day. And I think why we love doing this podcast is we get to talk to people like you who have proven that model to be, hey, no, it is a do it today. Like, and it is always a do it today, and it's never not. So I appreciate you sharing it. My last question, how can people support you?
How can people support us? That's funny because everything I do nowadays is like, how can I support others? You know? So that's probably the toughest question you guys have asked me today. How can you guys support us? I think, you know, technically, you know, we're still a small business. So think that if someone comes across VersaGym, and also the thing with our business is like, you know, we're a concept that's so new. Like, we are the first to market in franchising with a mobile gym model, right? So like plumbing, right? Like you have like hundreds, right? Like 15 different brands, 40 different brands of plumbing trucks that are franchises, right? Same thing with cleaning services, right? But like I always refer back to like, imagine like, you know, the first guy who ever started a gym, right? And it's like people used to get paid for manual labor, right? And it's like, well, now I have to go into this gym, do manual labor, and also have to pay you to do manual labor at your gym. It's like, makes no sense, right? Well, like it's the same thing with us. Like a lot of business people, a lot of people, when they look at our business model, it's like, why wouldn't you just start a gym? Well, this is why, right? We provide more convenience, right? So for us, it's a very new concept, and you always have like, you know, trials and tribulations of getting your business model out there to the masses if you really want to grow. Because like in Naples, I feel like we're pretty known in Naples. Like people know what VersaGym is. They've seen our trailers, our trucks. They've seen us at shows. Our local business is booming. But in terms of like nationwide, across the state of Florida, across the state of Texas, which is really where we're aiming to grow the most over the next couple of years, I think just sharing our content would be great. Sending it to a friend, it also helps. Just, you know, supporting a small businessman.
So if you are a POG listener, please share this podcast. Let's get this out there. I think this is a incredibly unique opportunity for personal trainers and for people that wanted to take their fitness passion and make it a profession. I don't think there's a better model than VersaGym to do so. So Carlos, I appreciate you coming on the show, man.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you guys for having me.